안녕하십니까. 오늘 제2회 싱크탱크 2022 포럼에 참석하신 여러분 환영합니다. 오늘 제2회 포럼은 통일을 위한 정치를 주제로 마이크 펜스 제48대 미국 부통령을 기조연설자로 모시고 한국, 일본, 미국의 정치 지도자들과 국내외 전문가 그리고 국민 여러분이 함께 하시겠습니다. 환영사의 순서입니다. 환영사는 싱크탱크 2022 포럼 추진위원회 조직위원장을 맡고 계신 윤영호 위원장께서 해주시겠습니다.
먼저 우리 모두를 위해 큰 환영의 박수를 보내주시면 좋겠습니다. 환영합니다. 신통일 한국이라는 주제로 개최되는 신통일 한국의 실현을 위한 전세계 지식인 연대체인 싱크탱크 2022가 개최하는 두 번째 포럼에 오신 여러분들을 먼저 진심으로 환영합니다. 지난 제1회 싱크탱크 2022 포럼은 신통일 한국을, 특히 신통일 세계를 위한 선결 조건인 전세계 유일한 분단 국가인 한반도에 신통일 한국을 위한 해법을 모색하는 과정에서 가장 중요한 관점인 국제관계적 측면, 특히 외교적 측면에서 마이크 폼페오 제70대 미국 국무장관을 모시고 성공리에 진행을 했습니다. 그리고 오늘 개최하는 두 번째 포럼에서는 제48대 미국 부통령을 역임하신 마이크 펜스 부통령을 모시고 정치를 주제로 신통일 한국을 위한 해법을 모색하는 아주 귀한 담론의 장을 갖게 되었습니다. 특히 한반도의 평화 실현을 통일을 전제로 할 때 정치라는 주제는 반드시 검토되고 숙고되어야 할 핵심 주제입니다. 왜냐하면 정치 체제는 그 체제에서 살아가는 사람들의 사람다움을 만들어내는 가장 중요한 토대이기 때문입니다. 존경하는 지도자 여러분, 문선명 한학자 총재께서는 이상사회, 이상국가의 정치적 측면을 다루며 만인이 공동 참가하는 공동정치인 공영주의를 그 대안으로 제시하시며 남북 통일도 이러한 공영주의를 중심으로 한 새로운 정치 체제에 대한 비전을 제시하셨습니다. 이런 이유에서 한학자 총재님께서는 정치 체제의 새로운 지도를 그리시기 위해 천주평화연합의 6기둥 가운데 세계평화국회의원연합을 가장 먼저 창설하셨고, 이를 토대로 각 대륙별, 각 국가별 서밋을 진행한 토대 위에 2019년 세계평화정상연합을 창설하신 것입니다. 그리고 오늘 세계평화정상연합을 대표하는 저명한 정상급 지도자들 가운데 한 분이신 마이크 펜스 부통령을 모시고 이 귀한 포럼의 장을 갖게 되었습니다. 바쁜 일정에도 불구하고 오늘 포럼에 참석해 주신 우리 마이크 펜스 부통령께 여러분 먼저 감사의 박수를 한번 보내주시면 좋겠습니다.
Distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I'm former Vice President Mike Pence, and I'm truly honored to address the Think Tank 2022 Forum, sponsored by the Universal Peace Federation and endorsed by the Washington Times Foundation. And finally, I also want to thank Dr. Moon for hosting this important event and for faithfully continuing the significant work she began with her late husband. Thank you, Dr. Moon, for promoting the cause of peace and for living out your life's calling with compassion and grace. During my 4 years as Vice President of the United States, at home and abroad, I've seen firsthand that truly great nations embrace the principles of religious liberty, freedom of speech, democracy, and free enterprise first. We know that strong families, education, equality under the law, and a recognition of the dignity and worth of every human life, born and unborn, is the true foundation of national greatness. And I believe if our commitment to these principles remains true and unshakable, the day will arrive when a great land once divided by war can become one nation and one people, united in freedom and peace. While the reunification of their homeland has been a cherished dream of all Koreans, we must understand that the dream of reunification will only be achieved by an unwavering commitment to freedom, security, and peace. Peace follows strength, and I believe the unwavering commitment to our common defense and our shared values is the surest pathway to the final and fully verified denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and to bringing about a peaceful unification of Korea within our lifetime. Despite the many challenges we face across Northeast Asia, I remain confident that a brighter future is on the horizon for the United States, for the Korean people, for our allies in the region, and for all who stand strong for freedom and security. Thank you for the honor of addressing you today, and may God bless you all.
네, 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 의미 있는 기조 연설을 해주신 마이크 펜스 전 부통령께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 자, 이제 전문 패널 분들을 모시고 대담의 시간을 함께 하겠습니다. 이제 한미일 각 국가별로 기조 연설을 해주신 마이크 펜스 전 부통령과 대담을 나누는 시간을 함께하도록 하겠습니다. 미국 스튜디오 나와주십시오.
Well, thank you again very, very much, and I want to thank the President for this real contribution to Think Tank 2022. And I want to begin by asking Ambassador Hill if he has some questions he would like to pose to the Vice President.
Well, in fact, I do have some questions for the Vice President. But first of all, I would also like to thank everybody who has put this together in Think Tank 2022. Certainly, we have an enormous challenge right now in North Korea. I keep thinking it can't get worse, and then it gets worse. And so I guess a question I would be interested in hearing Vice President speak about is the question of, in dealing with North Korea, we know that North Korea has a relationship with China, which is complex, to be sure. It's not all friendship, but there's certainly a strong relationship. Are we going to be able to make progress with North Korea without any kind of positive role or positive attitude from the Chinese? Because right now, I think we're looking at a very kind of negative picture in terms of our capacity to find any kind of patterns of cooperation with China.
Ambassador Hill, I want to thank you for a very insightful question, and it ought to be a focal point of attention for all of the thought leaders gathered here at Think Tank 2022 Forum. If you'll recall, we took strong stands in the Trump-Pence administration to deal with long-term trade abuses and imbalances and intellectual property theft that were taking place in our trading relationship with China. And before the coronavirus pandemic struck, we had achieved a phase one trade deal, the beginning of an improvement of our trading relationship, which hopefully would lay the foundation for improving relations across the board. But for those of us who want to see the progress of freedom and security and peace on the Korean Peninsula, to your point, I think now more than ever, we need to continue to stand firm in our relationship with China, and we'll continue to be a voice for that in the days ahead.
To Mr. Vice President, we really thank you for your message today. It's outstanding, and it gives us hope for all the world. And as you know, the founder of UPF and Think Tank 2022, Dr. Moon, is now calling for a world summit to be done on the 30th anniversary of her and her husband's meeting with Kim Il-sung. And that dialogue began there, it went to Kim Jong-il, and now it's continuing with Kim Jong-un. But it's continuing with an understanding that America's role is central to bringing peace in Northeast Asia and the world. That World Summit will convene America, Korea, Japan, and its allies, together with allies of Russia, China, as well as North Korea, and many countries that have diplomatic relations with North Korea. What message would you give to all those nations, especially those in the six-party talks, that can help everyone see how important it is for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and also the peaceful reunification of Korea with the support for economic development of North Korea and peace on the Korean Peninsula?
We look forward with great anticipation to that 30th anniversary summit and think it comes at an enormously important time. I think the characteristic of the Trump-Pence administration that was different than the 25 years that preceded was we began with clear resolve among freedom-loving nations. Republic of Korea, Japan, our allies across the world, and made it clear that there would be no concessions without the full and verified denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Our willingness to have dialogue, as President Trump personally demonstrated, could not be more important for the security of the region. And so I just urge all those looking on, the more we can all renew our commitment one to another, our commitment to freedom, to the security of the Republic of Korea and our allies in the region, I think it will make that dialogue even more productive on that 30th anniversary of that historic meeting.
Korean issue is one that really needs to be addressed short-term and long-term. There needs to be ultimately a reunification of North and South Korea, and hopefully that can be done in a peaceful way. Ronald Reagan, when he was president in 1983, he came up with what he called the Strategic Defense Initiative, which would shoot down intercoming missiles into the United States before they hit their target. Now, former CIA Director James Woolsey has told us that one of the biggest threats to the United States and maybe the rest of the world is an EMP attack that would shut down our electrical grid all across this country and maybe other parts of the world. If that happens, we could be on our way back to the Stone Age. So I'd like to just say real quickly to the Vice President, what should we do to make sure that that doesn't happen? An EMP attack would be a disaster.
I think what we need to do in the first instance, particularly as North Korea returns to firing missiles and moving back toward menacing rhetoric from the regime, is we need to remain resolved that we will stand firm and stand together until we achieve the full and verified denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I mean, to your point, whether it is the potential threat in the region or whether it be EMP threats, the United States certainly has missile defense technology, but the surest way forward for the security of all of our people is to stand firm in such a way that we can achieve, by peaceful means, the denuclearization and someday see the reunification of the Korean Peninsula under security, freedom, and peace.
I'd like to just mention, as we did many fact finders together with everyone here on this panel, Ambassador Hill always emphasized the fact that we need China's cooperation. And to do that, we got to show a vision of a unified Korea that's not a threat to China. What kind of governance would you see for the future? Assurance to China that it's not a threat, it's going to be prosperity for China, our allies Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and all the region, Russia too. We look for prosperity. Go ahead.
Well, Dr. Jenkins, it's such a vitally important question. I look forward to continuing that discussion throughout this Think Tank 2022 forum. I think there is an assumption among many people around the world that there is a strong bond or even a measure of great influence by China over North Korea. But the truth is that a nuclear-armed North Korea actually represents a threat to the region as a whole and not a de minimis threat to China. And so I believe that particularly in the dialogue that will take place, we trust, next year on the 30th anniversary, that as we reaffirm our commitment to our common defense, that there will be an understanding that it will serve all the countries in the region, first and foremost, to have no nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula.
So thank you very, very much for joining from the American side, and we look forward very much now to hearing from the Korean panel.
잘 들었습니다. 미국 스튜디오에서 벌어진 활발한 토의와 질의응답을 만나보셨습니다. 자, 이제 이곳 청신평화 월드센터에 참석하고 계시는 한국 패널 여러분께 마이크를 넘기겠습니다.
펜스 부통령의 말씀을 잘 들었고요. 이제 우리나라도 내년 5월에는 이제 새로운 정권이 들었습니다. 새로운 정부에 대해서 펜스 부통령께서 이제 좀 바라고 싶은 점이 있으면 저는 그 점을 좀 말씀해 주시면 좋을 것 같다는 생각입니다.
And when you speak about the best political system for the people of Korea, the good people who live across the entire peninsula, my hope and aspiration, and I think it should be the aspiration of every nation represented here, is that ultimately we would yield to a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I truly believe that right after we take a firm stand for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, all of our steps forward ultimately should have as our aim to empower the people of Korea to choose the future for the peninsula with reunification.
지금 결국 한반도에 있어서의 그런 여러 가지 문제의 가장 근원이고, 그리고 또 문제를 풀어갈 수 있는 가장 핵심적인 요인은 북한이라고 생각합니다. 그래서 오늘 펜스 부총리께서 말씀하신 대로 강력한 그런 힘을 가지고, 그리고 또 프리덤과 시큐리티의 피스라고 하는 이제 그러한 가치를 가지고서 협력을 해 나갈 때 이제 북한도 그런 방향으로 움직일 수 있다라고 생각합니다. 그런데 다만 문제는 북한이 우리가 원하는 속도로, 그리고 원하는 그러한 방향으로 오지 않는다라는 데 문제가 있습니다. 비핵화라는 것은 하루아침에 해결되면 가장 좋겠지만, 북한이 아쉽게도 더디게 나오고, 그렇다면 더디게 나오는 가운데서 조금 더 속도감 있게 나올 수 있도록 우리나 국제사회가 특히 움직이는 게 중요하다고 생각합니다. 그래서 일단 제가 한번 펜스 부통령께 한번 여쭤보고 싶습니다. 2018년에 싱가포르에서의 정상회담을 해서 비록 북한이 비핵화 부분에 대해서 실질적인 조치를 취하지 않았지만, 이런 소위 관계 정상화를 한다든지 이런 방향으로 나오려고 했을 때, 그때 가장 이제 북한이 원했고, 그리고 또 우리 대한민국 내에 생각했던 것은 북한을 조금 더 끌어들일 수 있는 그런 인센티브를 조금은 더 부여했으면 어떻겠느냐라는 기대였는데, 결국은 이제 미국 정부에서 그런 추가적인 인센티브를 제시하지 못한 상황에서 지금 상황으로 왔습니다. 끌어들이기 위해서 인센티브를 쓰는데 쓰지 못했던 그런 이유가 있었는지, 그리고 지금 현재 바이든 정부에 대해서 이제 북한 문제를 해결하기 위한 이제 무언가 그런 그 팁이라고 그럴까요? 그런 아이디어를 제시한 게 뭐가 있는지, 여기에 대한 펜스 부통령님의 의견을 듣고 싶습니다. 네.
Well, Professor, thank you for the thoughtful question. I think when you speak about incentives that would encourage North Korea to engage, I believe that our administration proved that resolve is the greatest incentive. And when resolve is combined with dialogue, that we can at least arrest the threatening posture that North Korea was demonstrating. You recall well that at the outset of our administration, there were threats, there were missiles being launched, nuclear tests. President Trump took a strong stand, and I still believe that resolve and that speaking with one voice is the surest pathway forward toward achieving any progress toward denuclearization or ultimately the aim to which you've dedicated so much of your life of reunification of the peninsula.
구냉전의 주 무대가 유럽이었다면 지금 미중 간의 패권 전쟁은 이제 누가 봐도 거의 냉전 수준으로 치닫고 있는데 그 중심지는 바로 한반도를 중심으로 한 이 동북아입니다. 그야말로 이 퍼펙트 스톰에 대한민국은 놓여 있습니다. 그것을 저는 이 평화라는 방법으로 좀 역발상으로 해결하는 방법이 어떠냐. 그래서 지금 한국의 DMZ에 국제 평화 도시를 만드는 겁니다. 그게 만일 점으로서 성공을 하면 면으로서 확대를 해서 DMZ 전체를 국제 평화지대로 만드는 거죠. 그래서 사실상 북한의 이런 비핵화 문제를 견인시키고 미중 간의 갈등을 완화시킬 수 있는 것을 가장 첨예한 갈등의 중심지에 있는 이 한반도의 국제평화지대를 DMZ를 중심으로 만든다면 이러한 노력이 오히려 동북아의 안정과 평화를 가져올 수 있는 하나의 촉매가 될 수 있지 않을까. 마이크 펜스 부통령님의 이에 대한 견해를 듣고 싶습니다.
I would say that however well-intentioned initiatives are between North and South, a strong, prosperous Republic of Korea with a commitment to her national defense, with a strong support of the United States, strong alliance with Japan and other freedom-loving nations. I say very humbly, I believe is a sure pathway toward achieving denuclearization, which is the necessary precondition to reunification and the true, peaceful progress of the people on the Korean Peninsula.
펜스 부통령이 재직 중에 싱가포르 회담, 하노이 회담을 했습니다만, 그리고 우리 모든 국민들이 북한과 미국의 정상이 만나면은 문제가 해결되지 않을까라는 큰 희망을 가졌지만 결국 비핵화도 지금 상황에서는 큰 희망을 보이지 않고 있습니다. 그래서 저는 오히려 생각을 좀 발상의 전환을 할 필요가 있다라는 말씀을 드리고 싶습니다. 지금 우리가 비핵화를 거쳐서 한반도 통일을 가야 될 수도 있습니다만은 생각을 바꿔서 이제는 오히려 신통일 한국, 자유민주주의에 의한 한반도 통일을 이루어서 비핵화를 달성할 수 있지 않을까. 그래서 펜스 부통령께 질문을 드리면 실제로 부통령을 재직하시면서 김정은과 회담을 해보셨기 때문에 과연 비핵화라는 것이 협상을 통해서 가능한지, 그래서 오히려 한반도가 자유와 민주주의와 시장경제와 가족의 가치하에 우리 서방의 자유동맹들이 공유하는 그런 가치하에 한반도가 통일이 됨으로써 비핵화가 오히려 달성될 수 있을 가능성은 없는지 조심스럽게 여쭙고 싶습니다.
Well, Professor, I'm very intrigued at your suggestion that we need to think outside the box, because I really believe that if you reflect on the diplomacy of the Trump-Pence administration, that is exactly what we did. There was a 25-year period of failed diplomacy where there was engagement, concessions, promises by the regime in North Korea, followed by broken promises, lack of engagement, and then the cycle repeated itself. But what was completely outside the box as well was that President Trump made it clear early on, after some strong rhetorical differences between the president and Chairman Kim, that he was more than willing to meet. And Singapore was a result of that, other meetings that would follow. And I think the combination of those two things ought to be an inspiration to leaders in the Republic of Korea, in Japan, and I hope they continue to be emulated by the new administration here in the United States. That we don't need to make the choice between strong resolve and dialogue. We can do both. I still believe, very humbly, that it still remains the surest pathway forward for a peaceful and prosperous and free future for all the people of Korea.
네, 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 한국과 미국을 연결해서 질의응답 시간을 함께 해봤습니다. 자, 이제 일본 패널 분들께 마이크를 넘기도록 하겠습니다. 일본 스튜디오 나와주십시오.
Thank you, MC. Thank you very much, Vice President Mike Pence, for your excellent, thought-provoking speech. In order to maintain peace and security in the Asia-Pacific region, there is a strong desire these days to strengthen international cooperation with neighboring countries centered on Japan, the United States, and South Korea, which are countries that share the values of freedom and democracy. Let us welcome Admiral Koda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kachikuri, and also thank you very much, Vice President. Today, as a sailor who spent 19 years at sea and also cooperated very closely with the US Navy and ROK Navy, in the past, there are some problems between Japan and Korea, and today is. But at least security side, we are on the same page. But my concern is the common thoughts are just started breaking gradually, maybe then quickly. So, Mr. Vice President, I'd like to ask your thoughts on how to bring our three positions of the strategic thought of three nations together to cope with the North Korean issue. Thanks, sir.
I would say with the deepest respect, Admiral, that my feeling on the issue you raise is that we should proceed very cautiously any public efforts that would in any way erode the confidence of North Korea or its allies in our commitment to our common defense. Under our administration, we made it clear that we remain committed to the common defense of our allies in the region. I think until we see the full, verified, and complete denuclearization of North Korea and the Korean Peninsula, until we see the end of the menacing threat to the people of the Republic of Korea from the north, and to no less extent from Japan, that when we took office had missiles overflying your nation from North Korea, we just simply ought to stand firm, stand pat, hold the line, and I believe that resolve in combination, as I said, with engagement is the best pathway to peace.
If U.S. troops withdraws from South Korea, it becomes impossible to prevent North Korean military occupation over South Korea. And North Korea centered unification of the peninsula, backed by China and Russia. This is a horrible threat that Japan never wants to imagine. I wonder how long the United States will be able to spend cost on South Korea.
As a family member of a Korean War veteran myself, I can tell you that the American people's pride in the success of the Republic of Korea is deep and personal. There's scarcely a Veterans Day event that I attend or a celebration anywhere in this country where we don't celebrate the service and sacrifice of American forces in Korea. And the ongoing service, I think, is a reflection of that. That being said, our administration made it clear that burden sharing among prosperous nations ought to always be considered in a spirit of fairness and mutual benefit. And as we continue to work through the issues of burden sharing, we, I believe, as a nation, will remain committed to our common defense, to our presence in the region until such a day that the threat from North Korea no longer exists. That as I truly believe that in locked in arms with Japan, with the Republic of Korea, with other freedom-loving allies in the region, that as we stand firm, as we engage, as we stand firm for freedom, demonstrate our prosperity, and stand for our values, that the day will come, I hope and pray, when the presence of U.S. forces on the Korean Peninsula would no longer be required. But I believe the American people will support that presence until that good day comes.
Today, in the context of peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula, I'd like to explain an idea to Vice President and all American. The idea is to build an undersea tunnel between Japan and Korea in order to overcome the unfortunate history of the two countries and to achieve friendship and economic development in the future. This idea was proposed by Reverend Moon Sung-myung about 40 years ago. So far, there has been a massive campaign in Japan and Korea to make this idea a reality. I believe that by working the tunnel project together, United States, Japan, and Korea will be able to strengthen the economic development and trust each other and demonstrate the strong alliance to the world. We'd be grateful if Vice President give us your thought or comment on this project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Professor Nishikawa, and thank you for your gracious words. They reflect the common purpose across the region that characterizes the relationship between the United States and Japan. And I think that project should, with great respect, should necessarily predate larger infrastructure or economic commitments between the two nations. I really believe strengthening the ties between the peoples of the Republic of Korea and Japan is absolutely essential. And I pledge to you that I'll continue to lend my voice as a great admirer of both these great nations, both of our great allies, to seek to promote just that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Finally, I would like to ask one last question. Despite both being allies of the U.S., Japan and South Korea have a variety of conflicting factors, including historical and economic issues. Furthermore, geopolitically, South Korea is connected with North Korea and onto China and Russia by land. On the other hand, Japan and the United States are separated by sea from these countries. My question is, what effort do you think are necessary to overcome these barriers and build a stronger relationship between Japan and South Korea? And what can the U.S. do to help in this process?
Well, Dr. Kajikuri, thank you. Thank you for your eloquent words. And I would say that forums just like this will contribute to that. The Think Tank 2022 Forum is an opportunity for us to come together as people and reflect on our common values, our common commitment to freedom and democracy, religious liberty, individual rights, private property. I think we have an opportunity to strengthen the ties between the Republic of Korea and Japan. And I know the heart of the American people would have that. And my hope and my prayer is that America can play a role in drawing your two nations closer together, because I think the stronger we three are, and those freedom-loving nations that are represented in this Think Tank 2022 forum today, the greater the likelihood is of peaceful unification, denuclearization, and a prosperous and free future for all the people of the Korean Peninsula. Because I believe it is a consequential part of strengthening our ties, our commitment to freedom, our commitment to security, and our commitment to peace. And in so doing, it will increase the likelihood that we will achieve that cherished aim of the Korean people for so many years.
말씀 잘 들었습니다. 일본 패널 여러분과의 질의응답까지 함께 하셨습니다. 여러분, 오늘 질의응답에 함께 해주신 모든 분들께 큰 감사의 박수를 부탁드리겠습니다. 자, 이번에는 평화마당 순서입니다. 대한민국 국민을 대표해서 마이크 펜스 부통령과 질의응답을 하는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다.
저는 탈북민 출신 대표로 질문을 하나 드리겠습니다. 윤선명 한학사 총재께서는 30년 전 방북하여 김일성 주석과의 회담을 통해 비핵화, 남북 이산가족 상봉 등 지금에 되돌아보더라도 굉장히 파격적이고 유효한 합의를 이끌어낸 바 있습니다. 지난 30년 동안 민간단체 입장에서 평화 자동차와 보통강 호텔 사업 등 과감한 대북 지원 정책을 통해 남북 통일을 위한 기반을 닦으셨는데, 이러한 회담과 그 이후의 프로젝트들에 대해서는 어떻게 생각하십니까?
Well, thank you, Doctor. Thank you for your question. I would suggest that we're in a difficult time with the progress toward a peaceful unification and denuclearization. We will defend our interests, we will defend our values, and even so, we are prepared to listen, to dialogue, to engage, and be prepared for the day that the regime in North Korea chooses to abandon its nuclear ambitions, its nuclear program, and then and only then, I think we can see a clear path toward peaceful unification and a free and prosperous future for all the people of Korea. That is my deep conviction. I say it with great respect to you, but it is also my prayer.
저는 정치 사상 혹은 정치 이념적인 측면에서 질문을 드리고자 합니다. 한국인은 예로부터 경천 애인 사상이 있습니다. 하늘을 공경하고 사람을 널리 이롭게 한다는 이념입니다. 이러한 사상과 전통의 연장선에서 천주평화연합에서는 이상사회의 정치 이념으로 공영주의를 제안하고 있습니다. 이러한 정치 이념으로서의 공영주의를 어떻게 생각하시는지 궁금합니다. 그리고 만약 부총리님께서 한국인이라면 종교적 자유가 없고 그에 따라 인권 개념도 부족한 북한 사회 구성원들과 앞으로 신통일 한국을 위한 정치적 비전 혹은 정치 체제를 만들어가야 하는 입장에 계시다면 어떻게 북한 지도자들을 설득하실지 궁금합니다. 이러한 문제는 남북한 주민들의 가치관적 화합과 사회 통합 측면에서도 중요한 문제라고 생각하기 때문에 질문을 드려봅니다. 감사합니다.
Well, let me say I'm a proud American, and I believe in the vital imperative of of nationalism as a force for good in America, in Japan, in the Republic of Korea. But I must tell you that I truly have been inspired in my travels to South Korea to see the deep tradition of faith among the people of your land, to know that that same faith, despite the tyranny to the north, is in the hearts and minds of millions of people in North Korea. As they look south of the border, and I remember that famous photograph, that satellite photograph that showed the bright lights at night across South Korea and the absence of light to the north, that if we can convey that message, that light comes from the values, it comes from the commitment to freedom and free enterprise, to family and faith, I can't help but believe that with God's grace, we'll see our way forward, and that people across the North in the days ahead will understand that the pathway to peace is to abandon those weapons that threaten the region and the world, to abandon the menacing threats of recent days, to embrace freedom, and thereby create the circumstances in which two nations can once again be one.
네, 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 자, 대한민국을 대표하는 분들의 질문과 부통령님의 진솔한 답변까지 함께했습니다. 여러분 함께해 주신 분들께 다시 한번 큰 박수를 부탁드리겠습니다. 자, 그럼 이제 끝까지 자리를 함께해 주신 마이크 펜스 부통령님의 마무리 말씀을 청해 보겠습니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say from my heart what an honor it has been to be with you for this Think Tank 2022 forum. It's a particular honor for me to have had the opportunity to hear from and dialogue with such distinguished panels from Japan, from Korea. I thank you for your thoughtfulness and the leadership represented. And I leave this forum more encouraged than ever that if we will simply stand firm for our security, we will stand together for freedom, that the future across Northeast Asia will be a future of prosperity and peace. And that will be our aim, and that will remain our prayer. So thank you all. And from the United States of America, God bless you all.
여러분 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 부통령님의 마무리 말씀을 끝으로 포럼의 모든 순서가 마무리됐습니다. 오늘 포럼의 끝까지 함께해 주신 전 세계 각계 전문가와 지도자 여러분, 그리고 온라인을 통해서 함께해 주신 모든 분들께 감사의 말씀드립니다. 한반도 평화와 통일을 위한 싱크탱크 2022 포럼은 앞으로도 계속됩니다. 자, 그럼 역사적인 제2회 싱크탱크 2022 포럼의 모든 순서를 여러분의 큰 박수로 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.